guy's had 1,000 yards 7 times out of the decade, 1,500 3 of the times, and the best receiver I have ever seen play football. And no, it is not Julio Jones. Hello and welcome to Stafa Vision. Today we go over the top 5 wide receivers from 2010 to 2020. Let's get into it now. So before we go, like, subscribe. You do it? Alright, cool. So at 5, we're going with AJ Green. He was actually in the same high school recruiting class with Julio Jones. They went back and forth from the number 1 receiver to number 2. Obviously one went to Georgia, one went to Bama. They've been chasing each other. So Julio ends up at 5 here. He came in the league like a wrecking ball. Did not have the right quarterback play. He had Andy Dalton, and that was all right. It was enough. It got him 960 yards every year for the first 8 years in that decade. Again, average quarterback play did not lead to an all-pro season. So AJ Green, certified baller, he's still playing to this day. It's just, if he had a better quarterback, he'd probably be higher on this list. All right, let's go next. We're going Larry Fitz at 4. I know he's played even well before the 2010s. He's played in 2 decades, actually. But if it was based off statistics alone, he's second in the NFL in yards, third in receptions ever. They moved him to a slot in 2010, paired him with Bruce Arians. Absolute baller. He could still play to this day, I feel like, but he decided to retire on top. Larry Fitz was one of the most... That Super Bowl run he had against the Steelers, Anquan Boldin, I will never forget that. Larry Fitz could be on the outside, moved him in the slot. Wide receivers age better than corners, so that's why you can see wide receivers like Larry Fitz extend their career. Corners end up at safety. It's not ideal. It's not as optimal. They get burnt by younger, quicker receivers. But wide receivers, they still have the route running ability, like still the whole techniques. They can get it done either way. All right, 3. Man, moment of silence for one of the best players to ever play football. That could have been even better if he just stayed. He retired at 30. So he was an All-Pro 3 times. He led the league in receiving yards twice. He still, to this day, has the record for most yards in a season, 1,964 yards. Cooper Kupp almost broke it last year, but he could not do it. 6 years, 1,000 yards in this decade. If he would have kept playing, he would have been arguably the best player, physical, opposing player. Not necessarily a winner. He was on Matt Stafford's Lions when they weren't that good. But overall skill set, the best skill set of any player in the league. Calvin Johnson was a legend. Getting Hail Marys against the Cowboys, against everybody. He was against the Bengals. I remember he had a Hail Mary. If you guys did not watch Calvin Johnson growing up, nobody could guard him. They had to put like 3 guys on him. Calvin Johnson he'll go down in the history books as one of like the most athletic, physical freaks in NFL history or sports history. Book it. All right, let's get it going. We're going at 2. Julio. I know. Wait to find out for 1. Julio, absolute monster. The way I talk about Calvin, you can see those exact same adjectives about Julio Jones. Julio Jones was a monster in Alabama, picked number 3 in the draft, went in the league, absolutely baller the whole time. He had 950 yards every year except for 2013, the decade. He led the league in yards twice. He had 2 All-Pros, 6th for the most yards in a game ever. And if you guys are old enough to remember, he did that against Carolina. Dude dropped 300 burger. That was crazy. And that was for a game. So Calvin, I think, Calvin has the record for. Calvin had it for the season, but Julio has it for in a game, top 6, and that game was so historic. He was burning everybody on Carolina. I had him in fantasy that year. That's how I remember. He was absolutely monster. If you remember that, comment that, because that was an unbelievable Julio game. But Julio every year, mismatch, cannot be stopped. He's still playing. He's banged up. I hope he gets signed somewhere because he's a monster, man. He was 3rd in yards for a season. That's what it was. So Calvin was number 1 in the season. Cooper Kupp 2nd. Julio was 3rd. But let's get to number 1. Man, I know off the field antics, especially if you're younger, that's probably what you've been seeing. But if you're an OG, you remember Antonio Brown, 4-time All-Pro, led the league in yards twice, led the league in catches twice, led the league in touchdowns once. Had 1,000 yards 7 out of 10 years. The other 3 years, he had 1,500 yards. Had 100 catches since 2013, every single one of those years. Had an aging big man and still got it done. The best receiver I've ever seen in my life. They called him Tony Toe Tap, Mr. Big Chest. He could do it all. Was unstoppable, unguardable. It didn't have the size, but yard after catch too. Dude was money. And that first down celebration when he shakes his hand, nobody could beat that. AB can't be stopped. He could be back this year. Pick him up. Win some fantasy leagues. Don't count out AB. He's the best wide receiver of 2010 to 2022. If you like what you see, like, subscribe. I'm doing running backs next. Peace.